Welcome back. Now, before the break, you heard the first portion of my interview with Bill Dean. He's the regional director of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. You heard about the contentious history of Indian Point and also the evacuation zone, both how far it would be evacuated and if the thing would ever even work. But here now, the second portion of our interview, we discuss, among other things, how independent the NRC really is. The public has always been divided on this, but one of the frustrations, and we saw this even play out Vermont Yankee, where you had the elected officials, the governor and others saying, we just don't want the thing here. You got the governor of New York saying the exact same thing right now. I've heard some say, let's put it to a ballot referendum. California, for example, you can have ballot referendum. If the people of New York got to vote, if they wanted this in their backyard or not, the argument is, why should a department in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania decide for New Yorkers or Vermonters in the case of Yankee or wherever the plant is, what's best for them? Why shouldn't the public, beyond just the NIMBY debate here, decide what they should have to accept as an acceptable risk when they don't get to have a voice, whether it be the county executive, whether it be the governor, whether it be the congressional delegation? Nobody here decides. An agency decides, in effect, what's best for them.
I mean, that's I can understand from a citizen living in the area of a nuclear power plant. You mentioned NIMBY, not in my backyard. They have the same thing with people that want to build, windmills or wind towers, right? Not on my mountain or not in my backyard. Go build it somewhere else. And that's a challenge with any sort of, I think, industrial facility. With respect to nuclear power, there's some very clear laws that invest in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission the roles and responsibilities for safety of nuclear power plants in the United States. It's not something that's delegated to a state. What you've seen played out in Vermont, Vermont was acting in their belief through this thing called a Certificate of Public Good, where they would be able to, per an agreement with the licensee who owned Vermont Yankee, provide the Certificate of Public Good based on things like reliability, economic feasibility, and so on. But nowhere was the issue of reactor safety.
But Bill, let's do it on a more basic level. If the people don't want it, why should they have to have it?
I wish I was of a congressional or senatorial level that I could do something legislative. Legislative to try and do that. But I mean, that's what the laws of the country are at this point in time, is that the purview of safety of nuclear power plants. Now you have to understand, before a nuclear power plant is even built or sited, there's a very robust process to do things like seek public comment. There's hearings that are held.
But obviously, as you're right, that happens first. But then the perception, and I think it's a pervasive one, is once that starts, if you look at past precedent, NRC hasn't shuttered a lot of nuclear power plants since you guys have been in operation. And the perception is, doesn't matter what happens. Doesn't matter if IP, and they've been red flagged before, doesn't matter what happens, they're going to get rubber stamped here and they're going to get approval. Perception and reality may be a little different, but that is the overwhelming feeling. It doesn't matter who's elected and what they think, the plant's staying open. To that end, on a practical level, today's front page says natural gas could be a boon for this country. We could be actually energy independent. The plant shut down in 2000, IP did, through a variety of issues. And for about 11 months, the lights stayed on in Westchester County. The energy bills went up, but only nominally so. People lived without the plant, or at least IP2. Is this idea that we would never survive if the plant, in terms of our energy costs would go through the grid, through the roof, the grid would basically not be able to sustain itself? Is that basically a lot of hot air? Couldn't the place make it without IP? Maybe they should have it, but couldn't the community writ large live without IP from an energy provider standpoint? Well,
there's a lot of, and I think you've seen some studies. I think Mayor Bloomberg in New York City put out some studies some months ago talking about how important Indian Point was at this point in time in supplying power to New York City. There's the whole issue of, there's other available power sources, but how do we get them to this region?
But you had to look at this when you guys were figuring out on the issue of relicensing and decommissioning the plant. If you did not relicense the plant for any reason, you obviously weren't going to leave the community vulnerable without energy. this had to be a consideration as you guys go through the process to say, could they live without it?
A part of the license renewal process is the applicant for a renewed license has to address other alternative power sources, ways to get power as part of making a determination. Here's why it's needed, and that is part of the review. But to be honest with you, it's really not something that the NRC focuses a lot of attention on. Our issues really are, is the plant going to be built, designed, and operated safely, and whether or not it's an economic need or not really doesn't factor under decision making. Really, our purview is if there's going to be a nuclear power plant, is it going to be operated safely, and will we protect the public?
To the point that in this case IP, but basically the entity that you're regulating, you have to be so reliant on for data, and then also as an industry, the significance of it in the country. Obviously, we're in a presidential campaign right now, but then candidate Obama and then running mate Joe Biden said the following about the NRC, and this was back in 2007. Obama said the agency had become captive of the industries it regulates. Joe Biden was asked about what confidence he had in the NRC, and he said, none, none, and none. Listen, there was an example, I say the name, you'll know him, but Jeff Merrifield, okay? He was a big guy at a company. He leaves and then directly goes to basically represent a trade association for the nuclear power companies in this country. Moreover, he's hardly unique in that. How do you tell the public at home, listen, we haven't shut down a lot of plants, and no matter what problems there are, no matter even what happened in Fukushima, we got your best interests in mind, but yet there's a perception, not even by a candidate or two, but it's rampant that you guys are way too cozy with the people that you're supposed to be policing.
Yeah, I guess I would take some pretty strong exception to that. I think that we maintain a very appropriate arm's length relationship with the utilities and the plants that we regulate. For example, our resident inspectors that live and work on the sites, we have a limit of the amount of time that they can actually work at that site so that we don't expose ourselves to potential accusations or perceptions of cozying up to the licensee, and so we make sure that we refresh and have new set of eyes get out to these plants periodically so that we can avoid those sort of perceptions.
Where else do you guys go after this but to go work in the nuclear industry? I mean, Bill, you're me now. Point A to point B, it makes sense. If I worked at the NRC, when I'm done, I'm going to go work in the industry I know best, which is the nuclear industry. Why would I want to bite the hand that's going to feed me, let alone hire me?
Yeah, I mean, and there's no arguing that the nuclear industry does have a number of ex-NRC employees that find themselves working in the nuclear industry,
like Jeff Merrifield, for example,
as consultants, right, or others. But to be honest with you, when those people do go out into the field and they start working for or consulting with licensees and industry, in many respects it's a benefit because they come there with a very strong focus on safety.
Listen, at the end of the day, somebody at home is just saying, listen, I don't have any axe to grind, maybe with IP. They're not here marching or protesting, but they just don't know, and they're just not sure. Any reason to think, Bill, finally, that this plant's not going to get relicensed?
I would say that there is certainly one issue that currently exists, and that is the state's
over the water,
the clean water certificate. That's a key component. If Entergy and the state can't come to an agreement in terms of what's needed, whether it's cooling towers or wedge wire technology or whatever the state believes they should have relative to achieving the clean water certificate, water quality certificate, that will be a factor in making that decision. But again, who knows how that's going to go?
Yep.
There's probably going to be, depending on decisions, court, look at Vermont, there'll be legal battles and things will get drug out into courts, and the lawyers will have a big say in what goes on there. And, I'm a safety regulator, I'm not a lawyer.
And again, I want to thank Bill Deans for that interview.